Safety. What an interesting position. When you look at it now, Tennessee practically, with most of the other teams in the SEC in college football, has a third safety on the field. They got the free strong safety, and then they got the nickelback. Well, those were most
Greatest
oftentimes.
band ever.
Yes, Nickelback is definitely the greatest band ever. They're
Love
right up
Nickelback.
there with, yeah, Twisted Sister. So, but essentially, we're bringing a third safety on the field, a hybrid of a linebacker and a safety. Before we get to the um, top 10 performances as a safety in Tennessee football history, how did you weigh that or not? I mean, I know you did because we talked about it off the air, but for those that might be curious, because you've got some awesome names and some names on here that over the years, in particular one, always causes great debate that he should be higher on any list like this. So you'll probably get some criticism off one name. I'm going to tell you who it is in a little bit, but how did you weigh sometimes guys playing in the box more from the secondary position?
Yeah, so I actually judged if you actually played in the secondary. And so there were some secondary players that moved into kind of a linebacker role hybrid certain times. I took that into account. So but safety more than cornerback. And Dave, you know this. You can take stats into account more for a safety than a cornerback because safety is their job is to actually be where the ball is a lot of times. Whereas a cornerback is to keep the ball away from them, honestly. And so I took into account tackles for loss, interceptions, and accolades and team success. All of that went into account.
All right, let's get rolling here because it's a great list. And towards the top, I can give you some insight into some guys that you may not know. Bill Young, 1968, an era that saw Jim Weatherford, Mike Jones, and Albert Dorsey have wild success at cornerback. Also saw Bill Young thrive at safety. Very, very good. And then right there at number 9, Tim Priest is the name you mentioned. He held the Tennessee single season interception record, I believe, for the longest time. And Tim Priest, because I think the work he did on the Vol Network, because he is remain local, is a fan favorite, no question about him. I think he's really, really good on his when he did the color commentary. I know he had to step away because I think he had a grandson maybe in college. But yeah, he's just fantastic. That 1970 year he had, 69, he had 7 interceptions, and then he had 9 in 1970. This is not a passing age of college football. This is pretty crazy to think about.
Well, the 1968, 1972 like years for Tennessee, like I think they have like the 3 seasons with the most interceptions in NCAA history during that period. That's why you guys notice a lot of cornerbacks and safeties are on this list for Tennessee from that period. Doug Dickey, actually, funny story, Doug Dickey was an assistant with Johnny Majors under Frank Broyles when Broyles was winning national titles at Arkansas, and Doug Dickey specialized in defensive backs. And that really showed with what he did. My favorite Tim Priest story you weren't covering at the time, he all but cursed out Butch Jones's play calling when Tennessee played Florida in 2017. And he's supposed to be the Vol Network, kind of loyal to the guy. And at one point, he's like, that was a terrible call right there.
And I'm just going to leave it like this. Tim felt that way a lot longer before then. Did I give a little insight without giving anything away? Is that fair?
About Butch specifically?
Yeah. Gibril Wilson, you have number 8 in 2003. Maybe we'll have Tim be a regular part of the program. See, you got me thinking. Gibril Wilson, the reason I love Gibril Wilson is he showed up. That mid-season enrollees didn't happen a lot. You'd have 2 maybe a year, and then you thought, wow, we've got guys that are really hustlers. They're going to go get it. And then it would happen with a junior college player or not. Gibril Wilson was one of those guys, and the sports information method back then was just push them in front of the media. So poor Gibril, I've never interviewed anybody in my life, and I've interviewed 8th graders that was more nervous. Like, what have I gotten myself into? There's 3 cameras. There's 10 people around here asking me questions. And then after that, he was incredibly well-spoken, great to work with, and turned into a great player. But I remember asking Larry Slade, I said, what is it about Gibril Wilson that's got him on the field so much? He goes, well, do you notice he's always around the ball? Good point. Maybe I overthought it. 1973, Eddie Brown, one of the hardest hitting safeties in Tennessee football. Why?
Eddie Brown was actually, it's funny because Gibril Wilson was also a hard hitting safety too. And Eddie Brown was right after that era of interception basically for Tennessee, what I call it.
Yeah.
But he was part of the Condrich Holloway years and had 5 interceptions, a bright spot on defense. And I think what we forget about the early to mid 70s with Tennessee was the program was clearly sliding. I don't know if it was Bill Battle's fault or the administration's fault for not giving him support. You could give me more insight to that than myself, Dave. But it seemed like the program was sliding, but players like Eddie Brown and Condrich Holloway kind of slowed the slide with their play.
It's a good point. It's a little bit before my time, but thanks for making me feel old to be able to give you.
Well, no, I don't mean you being. I thought you might know some people who had some insight.
I don't. I do think.
Like, did you know Haywood Harris? I don't know.
You brought up the point to me a couple months ago that probably Condrich slowed the slide. And I thought that was a really good point that I don't know that we've talked about before. Roland James.
Like Dobbs slowed Butch Jones being fired. But
yeah. Roland James, 1979. He started alongside Bill Bates. Bill Bates turned out to be pretty good. Dale Carter, 1990, even though it wasn't from the secondary. Who can forget the kick return? I think it was a kick return against Florida, right?
When Florida was kicking, the ball was going out of bounds, and Dale Carter's like, "No, I'm going to field this anyway." Yeah, he returned it for a touchdown.
Then you have Chris White in '85, who's a part of those Sugar Vols teams that nobody will ever forget.
That Dave wants to be forgotten.
That who wants to be forgotten?
I said that Dave wants to be forgotten. That you want to be forgotten.
No, I don't want it to be forgotten. I'm all for it. Bobby Majors, one of the biggest names, if not the biggest name, is the Majors family. And man, it's just you've got written here. The younger brother of Johnny Majors came down with 10 interceptions in 1970. He ended up with 36 picks.
No, UT in 1970. UT. Tennessee as a team had 36 interceptions in 1970. That's a record that'll never be touched.
Okay, now the top 2 I'm not going to argue with. Deon Grant, 1999. Although I would say because of the championship, I understand the stats may not back it up, but with the interception against Florida, I would probably put 98 just because of where my headspace has been. Then Eric Berry, 2008. You could go 2008 or 2009. Was that a tough decision, Berry over Grant? Because as much as I love Deon, that would not have been a tough decision for me.
No, it wasn't. And the reason it wasn't a tough decision was because Deon Grant, we're forgetting this part. And Deon Grant's a great safety. I take nothing away from him. But he had as a free safety, you're allowed to do a lot more things when you have help at cornerback. And Deon Grant was playing with Fred White, a hard-hitting strong safety, and he was backing up Dwayne Goodrich, who you and I know would have been a superstar cornerback in the NFL had the tragedy not happened. And playing behind Dwayne Goodrich gave Deon Grant a lot of leeway to do what he wanted to do. Berry in 2008 was playing behind nobody. I mean, I don't know who else was in the secondary that year.
No, he was about the only somebody on defense altogether. But you didn't have Fred White on there, so we had a couple of comments from Fred White left it on our new voice message board that people will give out the number for, and he wanted to say this:
"You suck, you jackass."
How could you not have our guy Fred White?
Shut the hell up.
I love Fred. I love Fred. I'm a huge fan of Fred, and there were a couple of people I had to leave off. There was Fred White was close, Bill Bates was close, Burt Reschishard in 1950 was close. I hope Fred
loved him and Smokey and the Bandit.
Burt Reschishard, he was in that? I don't know.
Oh, okay. That was Burt Reynolds.